Kia ora koutou, nau mai haere mai ki tēnei hui. Welcome to the Hawke's Bay Regional Council meeting, the last council meeting of 2023. To open us, can I please invite Charlie to open our meeting with a karakia? Kia ora.
Kia ora tātou. Follow me. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga.
Kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. E he ake ana te atahura, he sio, he huka, he ohu, si hei maurihura. Kia ora, Councillor Lambert. I have apologies from Councillor Hokianga and Tanya Hopmans. Are there any other apologies? There are none. I'm happy to move and second Councillor Van Beek. All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Are there any notices for today's meeting? There are none. Are there any conflict of interest declarations in our items? There are none. Item 3, the confirmation of minutes from our last Regional Council meeting held on the 29th of November. Are there any corrections to be made to those minutes? If there are none, Councillor Sears to move, Councillor Harding to second. All those agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Call for minor items not on the agenda. Yes, Councillor Harding.
Kia ora, Chair. Green hydrogen for Hawke's Bay. Thank you.
Kia ora, Councillor Williams.
Prime Minister's visit.
Any other minor items? Just those two, thank you very much. We move into our decision items. So we've got the Hawke's Bay Navigation Safety Bylaw 2023 to invite up our Katrina and the team. Kia ora. Would you like to start, Nick, or head straight over to
Katrina and Adrian for this.
Katrina and Adrian? Kia ora.
Kia ora koutou. This is the second time some of you have seen this. We brought it to the previous Corporate Strategic Committee. This is essentially to approve and adopt the draft Hawke's Bay Navigation Safety Bylaw 2023. I will take the paper as read. Note that bylaws are up for review every 5 years. This is slightly overdue, given our previous bylaw was slightly overdue. But here we are. We've had a number of submissions. They're attached as appendices for you to read. All of the submissions the team have met with and discussed their submissions. They've been able to resolve the items raised in submissions. Some of those have resulted in changes to the draft bylaw that was proposed initially. We've had good engagement with Maritime New Zealand, and I think that's about it. I would like to take the time to thank the team. Martin, the Harbour Master, Adrian, the Deputy Harbour Master, particularly our project manager, Jason Doyle, who unfortunately can't be here today. He's rather unwell. The team have worked really, really hard to get this through in time for the summer boating time, and hats off to them. They've run a really, really good engagement process, and that's evidence that before you that you don't have anybody wishing to be heard on their submissions, and we've got a proposed bylaw that's ready to adopt.
Thank you, Katrina, and well done to the team for that mediation and getting to the resolution without hearing. Thank you. Questions or clarifications for Katrina or Adrian?
One, Madam Chair.
Yes.
This paragraph 15, some of the federal engagement.
Yeah.
I accept what's written there, but at the end of the day, there's still that piece of engagement that's missing or lacking.
Through you, Chair, I agree. The team have tried hard on that. The region, as we all know, is not in a good space. What I think is our solution there, ultimately with the need to get the bylaw adopted, is keeping in mind that we've now got another 5 years to lead up to our next review, and not to leave it till the 5-year review period to have those engagement sessions, but rather to be ongoing consultation. We are engaging directly with our PSGEs between now and next year to engage in another piece of work. I think this is a conversation that we would raise at the time that we engage with our PSGEs.
Thank you.
Thank you, good question. Thank you, councillor
Chair,
Harding.
look, I have a couple of questions and a couple of concerns, but I'll start with the first question through you to Katrina. I'm just trying to understand the process through this. The paper originally came through CNS, Corporate and Strategic Committee, but it hasn't come back, so it hasn't had the benefit of coming back through the Corporate and Strategic Committee. Is that normal? And
Yes.
what is the basis? Why is that?
So this is a bylaw process done under the Special Constitutional Procedure under the Local Government Act. We put out a draft bylaw for consultation. We hear submissions. We ask for submissions. We receive submissions, and in hearing those submissions or receiving those submissions, and we either make recommended changes to the proposed bylaw that we notified or not, and we then put that up to council. Ultimately, it is the council that needs to make the decision to adopt the bylaw. There's no opportunity for a second go around. If the council wanted to make changes based on submissions received, this is the meeting to do that, not at the CNS. Our committee structure is that we always have a two-step process before it gets to council. A lot of councils don't have a two-step process for a bylaw process. They would bring that recommendation straight to council. So I think that's more about our committee structure rather than the process.
Yeah, with respect, it doesn't make any sense to me that you would release for consultation through one committee and then receive to another. Anyway, so that's as it may be. That may be my ignorance.
Just councillor Harding, I think you make a point that we need to clarify but can't answer right here. So can I please, Leanne, hand that to you for governance to clarify, not right now, but for future processes?
I could
We could
clarify
clarify,
right
yeah.
now.
Okay.
In that the decision of the corporate strategic was recommending to council that they adopt the bylaw for consultation. And from that, it is the council that is responsible for making the final decisions. So anything out of that consultation does have to go back straight to council.
Right, interesting. Thank you.
Second question?
Yeah. So look, I do have some issues that have come out from the consultation, been made clear from the consultation, but the overriding work that this is doing is really good in improving public safety around water. So, and I'm conscious that we're leading into a very busy time in water sports and people's enjoyment of the water. So in no way do I want to get in the way of getting the good work done, which I presume element of urgency in getting this bylaw through today so it can do its work over the summer holiday period. However, there's two issues that came out in the consultation that I'm concerned about, and one is around the advice from Maritime New Zealand around maintaining a register for personal watercraft. Their advice in the submission was that falls outside of the direct powers of this council. The requirement in the Act is to just maintain identification for craft, but it doesn't. The provisions don't provide directly for us to maintain a register. I recognise that register was in the current bylaw, the 2018, but on the face, and this is something that wasn't answered by staff in their response to the submission by Maritime New Zealand, that issue that question hasn't been answered. So it may be something that can be answered today, or it may be something that we have to take under advisement as a council. But on the face of things, are we doing something that we simply aren't legally entitled to do in requiring a register?
Okay, so I heard the question at the end, so.
Yeah, so we
Katrina?
do have a register for personal watercraft. It's not maintaining a register, it is licensing, but I'll pass over.
So essentially what this is around is the identification of personalized watercraft strictly for maritime safety purposes. An example of that would be a jet ski washes up ashore and we have a registration number on it. I can quickly search that number, find out who owns it, and get in touch with them. It might be a case of them having an incident out at sea and they might be in danger. It might be a case of it being stolen. There are numerous factors. Maritime New Zealand sent us feedback saying that we should probably call it identification instead of registration. It was just more so around the wording of it. Every council around New Zealand does the same thing. In fact, we have the ability to search other councils' register by asking them to provide us with the details. So people travel, people come from Auckland, Bay of Plenty, etc., and they have their skis registered with their respective councils. If something happens to them while they're here, we can say, this is the number of the ski that washed up. The person, we don't know where he is. Can you please tell us his details so we can get in touch with his family or find out what the situation is? Every single council does the same thing. So it's more of a discussion around the phrasing of it, but essentially this has been the case for the past however many years.
Okay, great answer. No, look, I'm completely happy with that. So this is it's not just us. It's a technical matter that Maritime and NZ have identified but not resolved. Thank you. Can I carry on with the second issue?
A question?
Yeah.
Can you frame it into a question?
Yeah, okay, absolutely. So why are we now requiring near miss reporting when we did not consult directly on that? We didn't make an issue of it. When in the past we've only required to report accidents as such. And the context of that question is that there was a very thorough submission by a yachty, obviously well connected with yachting clubs, concerned that was an imposition that in the context of racing, that there's just an imposition, unnecessary imposition on the status quo that's working, and why should they have to report near misses, which are normal events in racing? So
that's an excellent question. With regard to the reporting of the near misses, when someone picks up the bylaw, we can't assume that this person is an experienced boatie. For approved organizations, yacht club, sailing club, jet ski club, etc., they'll have an event management plan for their events, and we would approve that. So a request will come through to the harbour master's email. We have an event, a regatta, something or another, scheduled for this date. They manage that event with support vessels, extra personnel, etc. Those never need to be reported. But we have to bear in mind that whenever someone comes to the region and picks up the bylaw, we have to treat them as completely new to boating and recreational water use. Why should we ask for near misses? Because the reality is that accidents, incidents, and near misses all form a part of risk. If we realize that a number of near misses have been reported in a certain area, we would then know that, hey, we need to increase our presence there because 10 people have almost hit or almost collided or run aground or whatever it is. So near misses do form a critical part of that. It's a matter of trying to nip it in the bud, as we say, and intercept before there is an accident or an incident. And those statistics get shared with Maritime New Zealand, the co-regulators, and we're able to proportion the right resources into certain target areas and have concentrated campaigns on things that we realize have been an increased, where there's an increased level of reporting on certain things. So should we wait for something to happen? I don't think so. I think we need to start being a bit more cognizant of where issues are starting to form and follow that trajectory. So that's the reason behind it.
okay, so look, I completely accept that it's rational from a safety point of view. The point that I'm trying to address is whether there's, and the submitter was saying that this is an imposition on the normal operation of sailing clubs and it's unnecessary, but you're saying that in the context of regattas, at least anyway.
It is
it's
not an imposition, no.
So,
And
so the bottom line, is there a change for sailing and boating organisations, which is an imposition upon them through this that
No. So when there is an organized event and there is an event management plan, the organizers of the event contact us, we go through everything with them, and we approve it. Incidents and accidents and near misses that happen in that nature get reported regardless. Now, if two people are sailing and they both touch each other, which is customary in that setting, that's fine. However, we have to also be aware of the fact that not everybody is going to be able to handle certain vessels. And as I said before, it's not an imposition on their ability to organize these events or enjoy their time out on the water. It's to ensure that we maintain oversight of what's happening in the region and start to see trends and start to get the right resources in the right places. So to answer your question, it will not be an imposition on these organizations, the jet ski club, the yachting club, fishing club. None of these people will have it. We've met with them on numerous occasions to discuss this exact issue. So, yeah.
all right, thank you, I'm happy with that, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions there? Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you again for the paper and great outcome. I didn't see it in the paper, but I think I picked up you say we didn't need a hearing on this because I thought we were going to be up for a hearing as part of the process. And that's because no one sought to be heard or you managed through mediation their issues to be dealt with. Is that the situation?
Through you, Chair, we had one outstanding submission that was waiting to be heard, but the team met with that group, i.e. the local yachting club, resolved their issues and they withdrew their desire to be heard.
Fantastic. Thank you for saving us a job and for getting to a place where the communities are happy. Now, as you know, what my profession is, I'm aware of the need for certainty as a key tenet or requisite of a bylaw along legality and reasonableness. Alongside those, I'm just thinking of the position of a paddleboarder or a jet ski operator or a small boat operator or whatever. And in some of these new areas like Hardinge Road or the ones that follow, there are various interchangeably used definitions like motorised vehicle, powered vehicle, personal watercraft, which includes a jet ski. Hardinge Road says you can't use a powered vehicle in that swimming area, but it doesn't say you can't use a personal watercraft, so you could possibly use a jet ski. And I'm just wondering if it would be useful to have a definition of motorised vehicle and powered vehicle in the bylaw, and to just use one term. So unless there is a difference between a powered vehicle and a motorised vehicle, I did raise this at the corporate and strategic meeting. It just might give you greater certainty and also the people in that community. Am I a personal watercraft? Am I a motorised vehicle? Am I a ship? Am I a vessel? Am I a paddleboard? Am I a kayak? What am I? And where do I live? What do you think? There you go, there's a question.
Nicely framed. What do you
And can that be done now?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll go ahead and answer. So yeah, in the bylaw itself, personal watercraft is defined. There will be a definition for motorized craft, and that will reflect vessels that are propelled by motors, pretty much, whatever be an engine or whatever else. So that will all be in the definition, added to the definition. It was...
Well, hang on, it needs to be in the bylaw though. There isn't a definition in there. That's my point.
There's a definition for personalized watercraft, yes.
There isn't for powered vehicle or motorised vehicle.
So motorized craft will be the term that we use, and that will be added to...
Oh, great. So you will do that?
Yeah.
I think you should. Thank you.
That was mentioned previously, wasn't it?
Yes, I would raise that in
Yeah.
corporate strategic. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Curtin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I could go to Part 3, Reserved Areas from Restrictions and the Making of Reserved Areas, Section 7.1, and I'm just wondering whether this is simply a matter of a misplaced comma or a misinterpreted comma. Pursuant to the bylaw, council or the harbour master may make reserved areas and impose controls for one or more of the following purposes. But the Maritime Transport Act says that reserved areas can only be created under a bylaw or in the absence of a bylaw by the Director of Maritime New Zealand. So is that a conflict? But could you clarify, does the Harbour Master do it, or does the Director of Maritime New Zealand do it?
Okay, so with regards to reserved areas, in the MTA, the Harbour Master has the ability and the authority to act based on the provisions in the Maritime Transport Act. So an example would be that there was a collision of two vessels that occurred out at sea within the 12 nautical mile limit. We may need to act quickly to reserve that area to prevent other vessels from coming into contact with people in the water, whether it be an oil spill issue, etc. So from when you're speaking about running a reserved area, we're able to reserve that area and say, due to the implications about maritime safety, we're not allowing people to enter this area. So does that somewhat answer the
Well,
question?
if you're
You're
able to...
reading 7.1 saying pursuant to this bylaw, and there's brackets MNZ, then council, or the harbour master may make reserved areas? Is that what you're referring to?
That's what I'm referring to, yes.
So council is proposing reserved areas in this bylaw that is subject to MNZ approval. MNZ have reviewed and submitted and have no issues with the proposals. We make our bylaw in accordance with MTA, subject to MNZ approval. But I will come back and clarify that.
Sure. The point I'm making is that under the Maritime Transport Act, the can only be created by a bylaw or the absence of a bylaw by the Director of Maritime New Zealand. So there may be a piece of the Act that I haven't read, which is referring to additional powers that the Harbour Master has to also create a reserve. I don't know that.
It's not the harbour master creating the reserve, it's the bylaw that we're creating.
The council or the harbour master can create a reserved area outside the bylaw making process. I'm just referring to the clause making of reserve areas in their submission from the Maritime MNZ.
So is this under special circumstances?
No, sorry, I'm just trying to do a search while I'm talking to you.
You said 7.1, yeah?
That's correct, yes.
Sorry. I know that Jason would be able to answer this question immediately, but unfortunately he's not with us. Can I just come back to you on that? Councillor Curtin, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions, Councillor Curtin?
No.
No. Any further questions or clarifications? There are none. So just a question, Katrina, in terms of the recommendations.
Yes.
We have 1 and 2, which are very standard. 3, which outlines any amendments during these deliberations, did you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I have heard no amendments wanting to be made other than that clarification that needs to go back to Councillor Curtin. Yeah?
Chair, there was the addition of a definition.
Yes.
And the definition?
In the standard use, because there's an interchangeable use of powered vessel, for example, in Pūrere and motorised vessel.
Understood. Through you, Chair, there is some formatting that we need to fix. Acknowledge that. I do apologise that that hasn't been done between
Not a problem.
that and this meeting.
Yes.
Not a problem.
Yeah.
So
You've had a lot to do.
just for procedural matters, whether or not you're comfortable with the team taking that away or adding it to the amendments?
Well, you just, the motion could say subject to the definitional amendment raised by Councillor Williams. That rests on the record.
Pardon me.
Neil?
And clarification.
And clarification, okay. So we have those two included amendments. Okay. Who would like to move to receive the recommendations? Councillor Williams?
Well, it's trouble
Yep.
for you to do that.
And Councillor Curtin? Okay, would you like to speak any further?
No.
No? Councillor Curtin?
Just get my notes ready.
Fine, thank you.
Any other speakers? There are none. All those who agree say aye. Aye. Those against, carried. Thank you, team. Kia ora. Okay, we have next the Hawke's Bay Regional Council Group Statement of Investment Policies and Objectives, our SOPO. So I invite Scott Hamilton, Tom Skurman, Susie. Nick, would you like to open up?
This item really revises the SIPO for the Hawke's Bay Regional Council Group Managed Funds. I think it's hopefully a fairly easily read item, and I'm just going to hand over to Scott and Tom. Scott, to take you through it. Councillor.
Thank you. Go to Scott.
Kia ora. So thank you very much for the opportunity to come back and present the SIPO. This is, I guess, the culmination of a significant piece of work in terms of the work with council around HBRIC and the mandate that it has. It's also a significant income stream for the council in terms of where it is going to earn its future income. The SIPO is a document that sits there across the managed funds that you have. Council has an existing SIPO at the moment. It was last reviewed in 2018. So this update is a reflection of where the portfolio sits today and make some recommendations in terms of how council supports that earning of investment income as we move forward. So you've got, I guess, both a copy of the SIPO and the attachments to this pack, and then you've got the paper which sits across the front. I was going to make a couple of comments in terms of, I guess, point 11 that sits on the paper itself. So this is an important piece of work in the sense that the HBRIC board will then go out and do an RFP, or effectively a proposal to the investment management community for services back to council or back to the group on behalf of the portfolio. Obviously, the updated SIPO is the document that sits in the background there that you're then asking those managers to perform against. So there is a piece of work that sits behind this, which comes off the back of this process, and that will allow both the new asset allocation that's proposed inside here to be effective, but also gives the opportunity to, I guess, test the market for those services as well. So that's a piece of work that will follow. Item 12 in the paper highlights, I guess, some of the key changes that sit inside the SIPO. The first one is that the 2018 SIPO had 50% allocation to growth and 50% allocation to defensive positions. This one is 70% to growth and 30% to defensive. And the key difference is that if you think about how we've built up our risk profile, we still hold a lot of the assets that we used to hold in terms of the reserves and obligations. The one thing that changed between 2018 and today is that you sold 45% of the Port of Napier, and that is almost an intergenerational, kind of asset but like you put it away for your retirement and make sure it keeps on paying you each year. And the SIPO previously never really reflected that. So moving to that 70-30 allocation is actually looking at how do we get the best out of that as an intergenerational asset, so that we can derive the best return for the council as we go forward. We then look at the expectations that are in there. So there's twofold expectations. One is that the portfolio as a whole, the managed funds portfolio, will deliver a 3% return out to council, which is a cash expectation, which comes back into council to support it in terms of its daily operations, as well as inflation proofing that underlying asset that sits there, because that's important. And any returns that we derive over and above that will start to put resilience back into the community in terms of those funding opportunities. The third point is around expansion of the group's policies on ethical investments and responsible investment. So if we look at the 2018 SIPO, it was a fairly short and concise paragraph. Where we've gone to here is twofold. There are some exclusions that do sit inside the SIPO that you will have noted, but it's more about the principles in terms of what do we expect in terms of what are the values we expect our investment managers to operate by, how do we expect them to engage with companies in terms of that responsible investment process. And yes, there are some deliberate exclusions that we put in there and say, no, we don't want to see investment into, whether they are just things such as cannabis or other things, tobacco, which are excluded areas, or they are areas which are currently sanctioned by the New Zealand government, and obviously we wouldn't want to be participating into those areas as part of that council portfolio. So it picks up on that process. The other one that we've mirrored in terms of this is we've looked at entities like the New Zealand Super Fund. So they are recognised as being quite advanced in terms of the way that they proactively manage this, and we've got a lot of the same principles that they look to apply across their portfolio as well. So that's there. Sorry, I've got to put my glasses back on so I can see what the next one is. There are a couple of extra asset classes which are available. So this allows investment into the likes of private equity and other things. Again, if you're a long-term institutional investor with a portfolio of sufficient size, as you are, that would be quite standard in a portfolio that you would see. Again, I think if your old SIPO has been based on a $50 million portfolio, you've got $150 million in managed funds here. So there are some asset classes that have been added into the SIPO to permit that as well. And I think those, for me, are the key changes in terms of an opening comment.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you for that summary, and just congratulate the team really on bringing this to us after working through letters of expectation, the relationship with HBRIC and the vision that we have forward for our region in terms of investments. So thank you very much for the work. I'll open it up for questions or clarifications. Thank you, Councillor McIntosh.
Thanks, Scott. The SIPO rate of return 5.5%, that's on managed funds, huh?
Yes.
Excluding the port?
Yes, so look, the SIPO itself is a document which you then give to your investment manager and say, this is the rules by which we want to manage our managed funds. The reason that we've included a lot of those other assets in terms of the SIPO is that it's important for an investment manager to look at how do they help you to achieve your overall investment portfolio. So for them going out and buying a whole lot of shares in the Port of Napier, when you've already got 55% of the Port of Napier, isn't necessarily going to help you.
Hey, look, my next question is too low, mate.
In terms of the 5.5?
5.5.
Yeah. So look, 5.5 is not the target. 5.5 is a minimum, effectively. So if you sit there and say, we want at least 3% cash back, because that's coming out to the council and that's feeding the council every year. We want at least 2.5%, because 2.5% is where we're forecasting inflation is going to be over the next 10 years. And so therefore that inflation proofs the underlying asset. Our expectation on a 70-30 portfolio is that you're going to exceed that. But what that does is that extra growth that's going to sit inside will start to build the resilience up, which is what this council wants for future. So look, if someone came back through an RFP process and said, hey, we're going to get you only 5.5%, they won't win the day. But basically what it's done is it's been based on the minimums that we require. So the minimums we require is 3% cash and 2.5% growth for inflation, but you'll get a lot more growth than that, I would expect, out of a portfolio at that level.
Yeah, so can I have one other question? So why don't we just say that to whoever's looking after that money, actually, this is what we want. It's not an every year thing.
No.
But it is the sort of thing that we're looking for over time.
Yep. So I think out of the RFP process, you will find there are a number of managers that will come back and they will have different return expectations. Some of them will sit there and say, we'll get you 6.5 or 7 or 8 or whatever it happens to be, and with different risk factors. What we're asking them to do is to bring their skill back to the table when they present that back to the RFP, to the HBRIC board, and HBRIC board can then work through that process of working out how they get the best return for the risk profile for the group. But there are some minimums that we need to achieve.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a good explanation about minimum standard, and then there's a competition type process where you say this is the best decision above and beyond the minimum.
Yeah, and again, that's a risk assessment as well for the board to work through.
Okay, Councillor William.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Scott. Just following on from that, just thinking back to the last report on these funds, and since port sale and investment, I think the return over that period was around 3%, a little bit below or above, depending which manager. So before you go to Councillor McIntosh's 10% return, the 5.5, like to the layperson, can you give them some explanation why you think that's quite achievable versus what we have achieved up till now?
Yeah, so if you look at a traditional KiwiSaver, for example, and I'm not saying that you're investing like a KiwiSaver, but in a 50-50 KiwiSaver fund over the last 3 years has probably done not too different to what you've managed to achieve. If they were at 70-30, they're probably 1.5% higher. So, you know, there is that more growth type focused portfolio has generally done better over time, and traditionally has done better over a 10-year horizon as well. So, you know, a 70-30 asset allocation over 10 years will probably target 7.5 to 8 on average, would be where it would historically have been. And so I think, yes, we've been through a bit of a lull in the last couple of years, but I don't think council's been in the best position because its asset allocation hasn't actually helped the managers to achieve the best result.
One follow-up, please, Chair. Just following on from that then, Scott, so looking at that table, total funds, 150 million, if you do a quick calculation of, say we're sitting at 3% return now, and we double that to 6%, so that's an extra 3%, which would be roughly 4 to 5 extra million falling out, you know, before you go to wherever it goes to in terms of just income.
Yep.
That's what that potentially could be achieved if...
Yeah, so again, you've just got to be careful here to try and make sure that when we talk about total returns, you know, that is cash returns and capital gains and growth, right? And if you think of something like private equity, they might give you a 10% return, but the cash only comes every 5 years or 7 years or something like that. So there's a skill set that's required in the back there to make sure that we're actually delivering both cash, which is why you've got a cash target, and a growth target. My hope is that the growth target you achieve is actually higher, and yes, that's inside the portfolio, but in time that brings your resilience piece up. And appreciate too that as the portfolio grows, the 3% grows as well, because 3% on 150 million is 4.5 million, 3% on 160 million is 4.8 million. So, you know, it grows, as the portfolio grows, the return grows as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Harding.
Sure, Chair. Look, and through you, just it's a question probably in two parts around paragraph 8.5 of the paper that talks about what we're looking at putting into LTP in terms of the combined investment returns that we're going to bank on, if you like. And my question is just to understand how that relates to, firstly, how that relates to what we previously budgeted and what we actually experienced. Just to give it some context, and because we've got a mixing going on here of HBRIC assets and council-owned assets, and we've got a figure there which is actually not just managed funds, but it's the whole portfolio. So just trying to give some sensible comparisons of that. And the second, and then how assured that is. Because at the end of the day, if I understand correctly, this is not a cast iron promise, but it's an expectation that with the restructuring, it's more dependable, but still ultimately uncertain. Thank you.
Good questions.
Would you want me to answer that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've lost the question.
Okay,
So we've got about,
to
rephrase, we've got about 12.5 to 13.5 mil that we're expecting. In the past, we budgeted what was actually a much bigger figure, I believe. What happened was something else.
Yep.
And are we going to get this or not?
So look, I'll have a crack at that one. Some of that's disconnected from this document in the sense that the SIPO is what you're putting out to the manager. And so the manager you're looking, or investment managers, you're saying, look, we want 3% cash. Previously, you wanted to try and achieve that as well. You didn't achieve it because you didn't get a total return that was even at that level. But I believe that this is very sustainable in terms of that. So where you actually were versus this, you're probably better off. In terms of some of your other long-term plan performances, you know, you budgeted that you were going to get more money than you actually got out of your managed funds. You budgeted you were going to get more money than you got out of your port. and you budgeted a whole lot of capital gains in there, which you could never spend anyway, because they were capital gains that you were supposed to leave behind. So the 12.5 is really looking at, if we took the port today as it is performing, we should be able to get a certain amount of cash out of it. If we take the property funds as they're performing today, we should get a certain amount of cash out of it. And if we take the SIPO around the managed funds and we get 3% out of it, then you're going to get a certain amount of cash out of it. That'll give you your 12.5. So that's really where that's come from. There is, the capital gains that the SIPO should generate are on top of that. But again, you're not looking to spend those because you want to inflation-proof your assets for a start. And if council's appetite was to spend its capital gains every year, your investment profile would be very, very different, because you wouldn't be investing into long-term things. You'd play very, very short-term games. So I think in terms of, do I believe the 12.5 is achievable? Yes, I believe the 12.5 is achievable for the group, and there will be ups and downs within that. But I think that's achievable for what we're asking HBRIC to deliver to you. And in terms of, I think where the long-term plan was versus where you are today, combination of SIPO, market performance, things not growing to the degree that we thought they were all going to, all of those things have played probably negatively in the greater part, in terms of where the long-term plan of 21 is versus where you may be starting a long-term plan for 24.
Yeah, so just for point of clarification, you talked about you're confident that you'll be able to deliver, but the swings and roundabouts.
Yep.
The way this is going to operate is that if you make more, if HBRIC makes more than the ask, then they bank that with the idea of building up a not a rainy day fund, but a fund that by the end of the LTP period, in 3 years in this case, I think is what we mean by the end of the LTP period, then you've got a buffer, right? Yep. And then we kind of renegotiate the relationship because we can have more confidence and more predictable cash flow. The risk on the underside still sits with us. So, yeah.
I think there's two parts there. Look, the us piece you've got to think about, you're a group anyway. So whether it's HBRIC, and actually in a lot of cases here, what we're looking at is actually how do we manage council's assets best for council. So, the risk of a downside performance is going to impact the group one way or the other. If the port doesn't deliver any dividend, then there is a consequence for the wider group. I guess where we're sitting with this is that we've got a set of numbers that we are trying to achieve. The statement of expectations has outlined what that is. And for me, I've got reasonable comfort that that's actually achievable. And you're right, in 3 years' time, hopefully we've got a combination of maybe the port's doing better, maybe some of these other things are doing better, some of the cash has been saved and they're starting to build resilience, and we're doing better than a 5.5% return, and that's starting to build some resilience too. And those combination of things is about council starting to build up a better platform for future conversation.
Can I add to that, though, that statement of intent or statement of expectation, letter of intent, they are regularly reviewed on an annual basis. So if this council decides after 12 months that this just isn't practically working as a group, then that's the opportunity to change that position.
Yeah, that's fine. The question about whether it goes to the group or just to the council is kind of slightly moot from the point of view that actually we're focused on LTP, and the reason why I'm asking this question is in the context of the LTP, because it's the LTP that actually drives the ask that we're having to go out to next year for the next 3 years to our, the quantum of any of the rates rise that we're going to be asked for. That's why it matters at that level. But anyway, thank you. That's helpful.
Thank you, Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you, and good to see you again, Scott. My old bugbear or hobby horse concern is the building up of the reserve so that we've got some resilience in the event of a poor year. And there was the statement of expectation you touched on before that returns above the target rate would be accumulated into that reserve. My question was, is that and does that need to be reflected in the SIPO? And I'm wondering if it's in the sentence that says differences between the inflation-proof value and the investment portfolio will be reflected in an investment volatility reserve. Is that what that's talking about?
So the way that we're trying to manage this is exactly right. Look, there will be ups and downs.
Yeah.
And that will sit in a volatility reserve. And hopefully that will be positive rather than negative, you know.
So that's what that's talking about.
That volatility reserve is the build-up of that buffer ultimately, yes.
I'm just wondering about the wording differences between the inflation-proof value and the investment portfolio. Is the word value missing there?
We can put the word value in there, that's fine.
Or something, it's just between, I would have thought it's differences between the investment portfolio return and the required rate of return will be put into that.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
probably a better way of putting it, isn't it?
Yeah, and we can change that because I think
Yeah.
one's annual and one's cumulative,
Yeah,
so
just
depending on which one we
Would
look
make
at.
it a bit clearer in the SIPO that that's what that's talking, the difference between
fine.
the actual return and the target return would go into that reserve. My second question was, apologies, Chair, for not signaling I had to, but I know you're going to market for an investment manager. And so we're here, and then there's HBRIC, and it's got all these clever directors in it, and then there's something called an investment manager, and then it seems to be that there are then fund managers underneath that, and then there might be custodians underneath that. Can you just tell me the difference between an investment manager and a fund manager?
Yep, yes, so,
Or is there one?
yes, there is one, and you even have it today. In terms of the relationship that you have. So, for example, at the moment, you have two investment managers. You have Jarden and you have Mercer's.
So it's the equivalent of them.
So they are investment managers. So they are basically the ones that you're going to for advice to say, how do we manage this portfolio of money? In some cases, and in the cases of Jarden, they will go out there and they will invest that into a whole lot of stocks and shares.
Yes.
And in some cases where they can't find expertise to do that themselves,
They'll
they
go
will
to
go
another
out to another manager and use them, and they are a fund manager because they are managing a single fund at an expert level. So that's the difference between the two.
Gotcha. So your answer to the question is effectively you're looking for the equivalent of a Jarden or a Mercer, which could be them, depending on who.
Could be them,
tenders
exactly,
and-
yep.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Question. Are there any further questions?
Not so much, yeah.
Right.
Just, so you spoke about, Scott, you spoke about in regards to the division of the investment being similar to the New Zealand super fund into those areas. Does that 70-30 split mirror that as well?
Look, the 70-30 split is actually more based on the assets and the exposure that this council has. You probably, if you did look at the super fund, they probably wouldn't be far off that, but it's not, you're not using them for the asset allocation benchmark. The reason we're using them is for their expertise around things like responsible investment and the way that they use some of those principles and what they exclude and what they include, because they are, in my view, you know, the benchmark at a New Zealand level. They're well recognised internationally in terms of superannuation, global superannuation funds. National superannuation funds, in that context. The 70-30 piece is actually a recognition of these are what we're trying to invest. So we've got a whole lot of different reserves and we've got a whole lot of proceeds out of that port sale. And what is our risk profile on all of those, and how intergenerational are they, or how short-term operational are they? And that's really the blend of all of those things to determine what your asset allocation.
So would you term this particular investment policy as being conservative, balanced, or leaning towards growth?
It's more looking towards growth. If I looked at my previous portfolio at Quayside, we were more growth than this. So, you know, it's not again, it's, it is a growth. It is a growth-based portfolio, but it also recognises the fact that actually, and this is where you are different to the super fund in terms of that, the super fund doesn't pay anything out at the moment. You know, they don't have a mandate to pay money out for a few years. And so therefore, but this portfolio does have to, because we need to keep feeding council to achieve the numbers that Zan's wanting us to see come through. So, you know, we've actually got to make sure that we're deriving income or have assets that we can liquidate to meet those obligations as part of that. And so that's why the balance is there.
Feeding the hungry hippo.
Exactly, there's a little bit of that.
Okay.
Thanks, Mike. I have two questions. The first one is, given the direction and particularly the SIPO, Is our current HBRIC board missing of any skill needed to take this SIPO to the next level? And then secondly, next steps in terms of where the SIPO goes and when it will come back to us for review.
Okay. So if I can answer the second part first. My hope is that the SIPO will get approved by the council today as part of this process, because ultimately it's hard for HBRIC to go out and do an RFP when you haven't got a SIPO that's approved, or you're sitting on an old SIPO and you've got a new SIPO that's got a completely different asset allocation target. So I'd hope that council's at a position today that it can support the SIPO to get through. The process then of an RFP, it will be the board of HBRIC that will determine that. There will be others that will sit alongside them in terms of that process. So the RFP document I've drafted up, and I'm happy to sit alongside them as far as that's concerned. Some of the directors that you have around that board, you've appointed yourselves on the basis of their investment expertise, and I think that they are capable of achieving the outcomes that you want.
Thank you.
Happy to move, Chair.
In a second.
Second.
Would you like to speak any further, Councillor?
Just briefly, a lot of the conversations we have around the table regarding money are difficult ones for obvious reasons at the moment. So in that context, and in the context of the wider portfolio we've got, this is one of the best decisions we can make, and actually one of the most obvious decisions we can make in my view.
Thank you. Councillor Foley?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Scott, Susie, Tom and the team, all the work going on in the background around this and producing this updated SIPO. I think the returns from our managed funds have been somewhat underwhelming, and there's many reasons we've discussed and gone through why that is, but this is obviously a great step towards rectifying that, and as Councillor McIntosh said, we are facing a lot of headwinds around our finances and our budgets, and so this just seems like the natural step to do. We should have done it, last LTP, but yeah, let's just go forward from here. Thank you.
Councillor Sears?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Yeah, thank you to everyone. It feels like it's taken a long time, been a lot of discussion, but as you said, it's 2018, did you say, Scott? Yeah, it's been a long time. So I'm assuming now, as we go year by year, it'll be much more of a tweak each year to the things as things change. I wanted to say, just particularly note the way that you have picked up the ethical investment part of the document and moving that, more towards principles based, which I think is absolutely the right way to go. And I do understand, I've asked it before, Hawke's Bay Regional Council does its work, and its investment company should make the money to help pay for it. And those two things are separate, but it's really important to me as a councillor, but certainly I think to our community, that we know that the investment work that's going on is being managed in a way that we would feel pleased with whatever those investments are. So I really like the way you've done it. Yes, there's the exclusions are there, but as you say, it's actually the principles that matter, and I think they've been captured really nicely. So I wanted to say thank you for that.
Thank you. Councillor Williams?
Yeah, thank you. Just to really underscore that for me, in addition to unleashing commercial acumen to deliver better returns from HBRIC, what's really key about this for me is the resilience of the organisation to withstand future shock, and at the same time ever-increasing government burdens for the jobs we have to do on a BAU basis, without putting excessive loadings on our ratepayers. That's what this is about. This is making our balance sheet more resilient and able to support the organisation without forever reaching out into our ratepayer pocket to ask for more. So I'm really, really excited about it. And my personal view is that I have a preference for accumulating that war chest over time than ensuring that we have the immediate cash flow demands met as an organisation so that we can build up that resilience. But that's only my sort of predilection, I'm a realist as well. I understand the financial pressures, so thank you. Chair, just on, if that motion's put, I'm assuming it's within the edit, with that edit that I suggested.
Including the edit, the
Yeah,
wording.
thank you.
Mike?
Not so much a question, Scott, just an observation. Nothing wrong with the SIPO, but my sense is that we're always influenced by the triennial elections and the makeup of the council and sometimes the overreach of council into, they see a pot of gold there and, if you like, the goalposts move. And so we can do the hard work now, but unless it's sustained beyond the makeup of this particular council and those sitting around the table, then it'll all be for nothing.
Yeah, thank you for your wisdom, Mike. Any other speakers? I'd just like to close off and thank everyone for their commitment and work in this whole process to get us to where we are. This is about providing certainty back to us as a council, particularly with our LTP assumptions, and building resilience into our investments in the future. So thank you very much. All those who agree say aye. Aye. Those against, carried. Kia ora. Thank you, team. May I please invite the presenters of the Risk and Audit Committee, Susie and... Just Susie? Just you? Not just. Absolutely, Susie.
The purpose of this paper is to bring to you items that were previously on the agenda at the Risk and Audit Committee that have been recommended through Council. Today, I want to note the MWLAS infrastructure insurance layer update. At the Risk and Audit Committee, we discussed and proposed that HBRC seek an additional layer of infrastructure cover for reasons I will go into. The second point today is I want to highlight other information and items such as the recent Ernst & Young Management Report outcome. We discussed the risk management policy update at the Risk and Audit Committee, which has recently been updated along with our risk maturity framework. And I also would just want to touch on the Treasury Compliance Report. Can I take you firstly to the insurance layer? So we belong to MWLAS as a group policy. Recently, MWLAS board did investigation on or a deep dive analysis on what would happen as a group. That group includes councils around the middle, lower North Island. If there was a material event that would impact the lower half of the North Island, such as our earthquake subduction, down the East Coast, we would significantly, highly likely be underinsured in the event that group policy is tapped into by everyone. They recommended that we take out an additional 200 million layer of cover, and we're currently seeking that. We had to opt in. We haven't initially taken up that offer. We don't know what the pricing is. There was a little bit of chicken and egg going on. You had to opt in to enable them to price that, and we're still in the process of having that priced. There are only 3 other councils that have opted in to that based on price. That is going to significantly lift, obviously, the price of what that is obtained. But once obtained, we will put that through the appropriate forum, being either Risk and Compliance or Risk and Assurance Committee, Corporate and Strategic or Council, whatever is the closest to receiving that. The report that was given by MWLAS is attached. Very quickly, I want to touch on the Ernst & Young Management Report. Given the absolute chaos that we incurred this year in our financial accounts with the cyclone and government funding, we came through the audit really well, and we had 2 sort of non-standard emphasis of matter items. One of them is the greenhouse gas, the way in which we report our greenhouse gas emissions. This is a national qualification that everyone has been made. It's really complicated to identify and measure greenhouse gas emissions, and as such EY had a matter of significance or an emphasis of matter. And the other material thing that we actually advised this council pre the audit being undertaken is we chose not to have formal valuations done on our stock banks this year. Primarily, as you'll appreciate, we were rebuilding. It was chaotic. We do intend on doing those. We undertake those with an independent valuer, and we will do that. We just chose not to do it for the cyclone, for the financials this year. The only other thing I will allude to, the Treasury Compliance Report, I'll take the risk management policy as read, but the Treasury Compliance Report, as at the end of September when we put that through, that identified that we were in some instances starting to butt up against some of our thresholds in our debt and our counterparty risk measures. Primarily those measures were set when we last did the LTP. As you all appreciate, we are ramping up on our spend at the moment, including money flowing through our accounts from government, and we are taking the opportunity to have a look at some of those thresholds that we have in place, certainly around our counterparty, how much we hold and how much we can borrow through counterparties, what swap arrangements and how much we hedge, etc. So the compliance report was discussed at that meeting. I will take that and the rest of the paper is read, just around the other frameworks.
Thank you,
Open to questions.
Susie. Would any of our other committee members like to make comment from the last meeting? Macintosh?
Just a point of clarification, on the 200 million, if less have opted in, doesn't that mean we don't need 200 million cover?
Likely, yeah.
And that costs come down a bit?
Well, it could go either way. We're just not sure on how much we're going to be able to get. If we can get more, we will likely try. It just, we don't know yet. We haven't heard back. But law of supply demand, surely, yes, that equates, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Harding?
Just wanted to follow with that through you, Chair. Just a question on the timing. Susie, the expected timing of that pricing coming through, do you think that we're going to get that in time to process into the LTP?
I'm looking at Jess Bennett, yeah.
Thank you, that's great. Look, and just a couple of observations sitting on that committee, and I think the key one is the risk management framework. So we've fundamentally changing our risk management framework that involves a top-down process that I think that the ELT have already more or less done, if not fully done. The ownership of risks passed down to the next tier of managers, and that is an important process that in the Risk and Audit Committee we need to follow through to ensure that it's embedded. But having been a little bit nervous up front about a change to the way that we're dealing with risk and the risk that it may get lost, I was actually very reassured at the last Risk and Audit Committee that the progress has been made and that it does look like it's going to be a great system, provided it gets finished and not lost. But it's looking really, really good.
Thank you, Councillor Harding. Councillor Curtin? Councillor Van Beek?
Yeah, just under your attachment, there's just a typo, or it's a new word that you've invented. Item 7, bottom left corner. I think it's management, but it's not management. Anyway, I've got a question regarding on the second attachment, item B, and it's the success statement. It says there, we understand the expectations and needs of the community we serve and our plans meet community needs. Could you explain that, please?
I'm sorry, I can't find attachment 1, item 7.
Item 7, attachment 4, line B.
I don't appear to have that. What page are you on?
That's the assurance universe.
Sorry, here you go. I do appear to have that.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just repeat that? Sorry, Jared.
So that's attachment 4. Under success statement, you've got a line B. And it says, we understand. Sorry, it's just going a bit smaller on me. We understand expectations and needs of the community we serve, and our plans meet community needs. Can you explain that, where that sits in what we do?
Yeah, so those success statements primarily have come from our annual plan, our long-term plan, where we set our visions and our values as an organisation. And so those have been uplifted from what we say to our stakeholders. What does that mean practically?
And is that reported on? Subsequent question.
Yeah, so our vision and values, this is actually bigger than a risk question, risking committee. So these vision and values then become our annual plan of where we then create strategies around climate, water, biodiversity, etc. And that then becomes our level of service measures. So the way in which we measure whether or not we are meeting our commitments under that is our level of service measures. Does that answer?
Yeah, and where is
at a high
it
level?
generally reported?
That goes into the organisational performance report quarterly into the corporate and strategic committee.
So this can be tracked?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Thank you. I'm going to look for it.
Sorry.
Are there any further questions for Susie? None. Could I get the committee members to move and second the recommendations to the
Happy to
council?
move.
Councillor Harding and Councillor McIntosh, would you like to speak any further?
Thank you.
No? Any other speakers? Councillor Williams.
Pernickety.
Sorry?
Pernickety.
Pernickety, is that?
I would like to underscore the point that Susie made in the context of the year that we've just had, to get a qualified opinion because we didn't do a comprehensive impairment assessment and or a revaluation of assets that had just been smashed to pieces, seems to me pernickety. In other words, placing too much emphasis on trivial or minor details, fussy. I'm grateful to our auditors for being so thorough, but I just see those issues in the context that they are, and do note that if I were to be pernickety, I would suggest that their reference to a compressive impairment is a typo. They should get their audit report checked, basically. Thank you.
Great. Councillor Roadley? I'm feeling I need to go to my thesaurus before I pass a comment. I was just going to say in plain language, Susie, a huge thank you and acknowledge the work that's gone into in this year that, as you said yourself, has been chaotic, and the unravelling of that chaos to land in this place is absolutely outstanding. So congratulations to you and your team. Well done. Thank you. All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Thank you, Susie. We now move on to...
We're not constituted.
Sorry, Jane.
Press Susie Cheryl.
Oh, that's why you're still here. That's right. Next item, the insurance.
Issuance.
Oh, it's, no, on the actual council paper is actually issuance, issuance of stock, security stock under debenture trustee. Now, this is a little special that I've brought to you today, and a lot of you will probably think, oh my God. But the purpose of this paper is really, is following our policy. And it's just a matter of courtesy that I'm bringing this to you to seek approval for us to enter into a relationship with ANZ. Now, under our Treasury policy, I need council approval to enter into new relationships. And under the debenture trustees, I need your approval to seek to issue security stock. Now, it is the reason why we want to enter into this relationship is we are currently being incredibly challenged on the facilities available to us to manage under our Treasury policy. I've just alluded to that, what we talked about in the Risk and Compliance Committee. We are wanting to start to use ANZ to enter into some swap transactions. Primarily swap transactions only at this stage, but it may lead to other relationship, not necessarily credit, we get that through LGFA, but could could lead into other relationships, but primarily we want to start using ANZ for swap relationships. We want to start getting some more competitive pricing. Currently, we only use Westpac and already have an existing relationship with BNZ. In order to execute into swap transactions, just like any other credit facility, you need security. And so all of these transactions that we do, including those through local government, we issue security stock as security once we enter into that relationship. That stock obviously then provides security. There is a risk to that only in the event of default by the council. That is extremely low, extremely low. This stock, the way in which it provides security is essentially what happens is we will issue that security and it's securitized by rates revenue. So if anything ever goes belly up, the stockholder has access to future rates revenue. The likelihood or the risk of this ever eventuating, i.e. an event of default, is very, very, very low. So today I'm seeking approval to enter into a relationship with ANZ. The paper alludes to having a variable limit. What that is saying is I want to be able to transact on a regular basis depending on my swap needs as opposed to having a set amount. Generally, under the delegated authority, myself and the CE can transact up to 10 million, 15 million. But it is likely if I enter into swap transactions, I may do 2 million, 4 million, 3 million, depending. But what I don't want to do is have to come back to this council to seek approval for further issuance of stock every time I do that. Now, you're all looking at me a little bit funny. You've probably never had these papers put in front of you. That is because these relationships already in existence with Westpac and BNZ are very old. They've already got quite high limits. It's just this is a new relationship. I'm going to leave it at that. I see this as quite administrative, if I'm honest, and the risk is very, very low.
Thank you. Thanks for pointing that out. Any questions for Susie on that? Councillor Curtin.
I've just been pernickety here. At paragraph 5, or in fact paragraph 6, you talked about it, the security being a charge over its rates and rates revenue. For practical purposes, though, how does that transact? They just simply go to our bank account, take it out, or?
So an event of default is obviously if we weren't to pay the interest or the coupon rate or whatever the interest was, or we fail to repay the full amount at the end. We will then have between 30, or that's outlined in the debenture trust deed, we will then have a certain amount of days in which we would need to either come up with more funding ourselves, i.e. go and borrow from another establishment to repay, or they would then seek from us up to $5 million, $10 million of rates revenue. It is assumed that would come from either current revenue or deposits held in the bank, or you would actually then have to create a liability or a commitment to reimburse through future rates revenue.
Chair, if we got to a stage where there was a call of that nature, we have much bigger problems.
You wouldn't probably, yeah.
Absolutely. Are there any other questions? Councillor Van
Do
Dyke?
you have to inform the other banks that we have a relationship with?
No.
Okay, it's not of that.
You can just watch this live stream.
They will know in the event that we seek to enter into a swap, it's a bit like RSPing really. When we want a transaction, we will go to all the banks and say, what's your pricing, what can you do? So they'll be well aware if they don't get it, that another bank's got it.
And of course, in the olden days, if a young lady like yourself would come to us and ask for a relationship with someone, we would actually like to meet that person. But anyway, there's different times.
Councillor Harding.
Kia ora, Chair. Through you, question for Susie. Recommendation 3 reads, adopts the issuance of security stock under the debenture trust deed as proposed. Do you think it would be better if we added the words staff report as proposed? And do you think that gets us to where we want to go? Because I was struggling with the vagueness of it all, but I think those 2 words would just get us there.
Can you just repeat the whole resolution?
So I would suggest it reads, adopts the issuance of security stock under debenture trust deed staff report as proposed.
Approves? Can we add approves in there?
Approves, yeah, or
My suggestion is that because we're not actually asking them to adopt the trust deed, are we?
No.
We're asking them to agree that staff are able to
Yeah.
issue the, so that, to me, that word should be approves instead of adopts.
It's exactly right.
Is that-
Hang on, approves the issuance of a deed.
Yeah. As
well, actually, we were
opposed-
approving the relationship, so I was actually going to wordsmith something much longer, which is we're adopting the report and approving the relationship, but I didn't have time for that.
Okay.
I think you needed our approval to issue a
Ooh,
So I've got approves the relationship. Are we?
So if you go to page, if you go to para 8, which says council is required to approve the new banking relationship, if those kind of words were reflected in that recommendation 3, I think we'd be there.
Okay.
So it could be adopts the report, the staff report,
Yeah.
and approves the new banking relationship with ANZ as proposed.
Sorry, thank you, councillors.
Thank you. That makes a lot more sense. Thank you. And you'd like to move that, Councillor Harding?
Yes, I would like to move that.
Councillor Curtin, would you like to second that? Would you like to speak further?
Yeah, just briefly, look, I have suggested that it might be beneficial to bring a paper on the debenture trustee to a future, and I'm not sure whether that'll be a risk and audit or a corporate strategic, just for information so that people understand and also get a sense of what stock's been issued, how it all works, because it will become increasingly relevant as we gear up our borrowings. Thank you.
Good point. Councillor Curtin, any other speakers? There are none. All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Thank you, Susie. Great explanation. Okay, we're moving on to affixing the common seal. Quite standard.
Just a question of Susie.
On affixing the common seal.
Well, just the implications of payment to ACC as a consequence of those leasehold sales.
Is this in the last item?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, affixing the common seal, yeah.
So we've
Sorry,
got 4 properties to being sold. Obviously, we need to make a payment to ACC. How does that? What are the numbers involved there?
Oh, gosh, now I don't, sorry, councillor Curtin, I don't have that offhand. No, I'm not going to be able to give you those numbers, sorry.
Too pernickety. Too pernickety today.
They only count how many times you can use that word.
Love it.
Whilst Chair's busy, Susie, 3.3 of that paper notes that they're subdivisions, and it might be just a title rearrangement as opposed to disposition.
It says land sales, leasehold land sales.
Maybe from a cross lease to a
Cross
single
lease.
lease, yeah.
Yeah.
So no money changing hands? No, maybe?
What kind of
Hey,
transaction is that?
Any further questions? There are none. I'm happy to move. Second, councillor Foley. All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Thank you. And we move on to our information items. We're very but it is fortunate that we have this paper that helps consolidate all the work, the challenging work that's gone into the land categorisation process. And before we start, and I hand over to Nick, just a huge thank you really to the team, and we'll go through the work that's done here, but it is purely just on record, an update for ourselves as a reminder, but also to the public of all the work being done. So thank you, Nick.
Thank you, and through you, Chair, I think just to acknowledge at the beginning of this paper, and thanks for your thanks to all the staff who've been involved, and just also to acknowledge at the beginning of this paper that for communities right across Hawke's Bay, from Wairoa through to Parongaho, the impacts of the cyclone have been really stressful, and the fact that people have had to go through the land categorisation process has been difficult for those communities, and a number of those communities are still in that process, and particularly Wairoa and Parongaho, which is still at 2A. So I think that was an important place to start. Really, the purpose of this item, Chair, was to put on the council record the process that's been followed over the last 5 or 6 months since the 1st of June in adopting a land categorisation framework, following it through, and then making a series of quite complex and difficult decisions relating to the risk to life post the cyclone. All the material that you see in here and all the maps that have been clarified as a result of the land cap process are on a website. There's a land categorisation website and have been available to the public now for a significant period of time. So that material is very upfront and very clear for people. But it felt to me really important that we, at the end of what's been a particularly challenging year, make sure that this item sits on the council record as well. You'll all know Chris and Matt, our in-house counsel, and most of you I think will know Jess Easton, who has also been providing us legal advice through this process. I'm going to hand over to Chris to give you a bit of an outline from his perspective. Matt and Jess are here because it's really significant that the process we've followed, is potentially open to people down the line if they wanted a recourse to the courts at any point. And so Matt and Jess are here to just guide us as we go through any questions as a result. My suggestion, and the reason this isn't a decision item, the decisions have ultimately lain with me as the Chief Executive to sign off on land categorisation. But the public view of the process is particularly important. So I'll hand over to Chris to take you through a bit of the detail.
Thank you. So, thanks to Jess and Matt for putting this paper together. It was a big piece of work and really tracks through a bit of an account. And just, I guess like Nick said, this was very emotional work for staff. Communities had been through a huge amount. We were talking to people who had lost their homes and their land, which may have been with them for generations. And so it was really challenging work for all involved, but very necessary work, and work that I think we balanced the speed and the quality, dealing with communities so we could move through it reasonably quickly to give people certainty as to what was happening with their lives. And that was a very important tenet for everyone involved, was around supporting communities and providing communities with with so many uncertainties around at that time. So we have moved through it really at pace compared to how we would do this work normally. And I'll just recap a few key points, and one is that this process was issued by government on the 1st of May. As a process to deal with all of the East Coast and also Auckland in response to the cyclone and previous storm up at Auckland. Here in Hawke's Bay, we assessed over 3,000 properties, so that just gives you an idea of the scale of the piece of work. And we also quite cheekily invented our own category, which was that 2C star, and that again was about caring for our community, trying to indicate to communities that lived behind substantial flood protection infrastructure that once that flood protection infrastructure was repaired, we would be signalling that they'd go back to Category 1. And you can see on some further dates that happened reasonably quickly. Within months of the cyclone, we had repaired over 6 kilometres of stop bank, which was substantially damaged. The work still continues. There's a number of communities that are in 2C, and we've got what we're calling the engineering pods. We've got 3 different consultant groups working across with our team, and so that's Omahu, Pakurahawa Drive, Whirinaki, Pakawhai, Waiheke and Havelock North, all continuing to work with those communities. and also noting that Paronga and Wairua are still in 2A. We very much wanted to move those communities into a little bit more certainty before Christmas, but through talking with those communities, we need to do a bit more work with the communities and their input to the process, and so we'll continue to do that early into the new year. I think attached, which is really important, is our process and framework. So you can have a look through that. That is a public document. We've provided it to the other councils as well through the process. So that's a very good reference document. It's also important to note that this work was overseen by two separate professional consulting engineers companies, the first being Paddle Delamore Partners. So they were engaged to independently review and assure all of the work that we did, including the mapping, and they produced a number of reports that are available on the website that Nick spoke about. And also the Cyclone Gabrielle Recovery Task Force in Wellington engaged Tonkin and Taylor to provide an independent peer review of our methodology. And so again, that gives some robustness to the process that we went through and some independent review. The other thing to note, it was a process in which our communities could provide feedback, and as we provided information, we had over 330 requests for that information to be reassessed, and there are different ways we did that, but I think the key there is there was an open dialogue with communities where new information or different views could be shared, and then we would review that information. This work is substantially complete, so certainly for the Category 3 areas, the current position is that there'll be no further changes to the land categorisation unless there's new compelling information presented that was not previously available to the technical experts. So that's really our benchmark for reviewing any Category 3 areas, and obviously we'll continue to work with those Category 2 areas. And our test there for moving them into Category 1 is that we have a sound concept and consenting pathway, that we have a legal interest in the favour of ourselves to build and operate that infrastructure, and that we have available funding. So that available funding is important because although funding announcements have been made, we need to do business cases with Crown Infrastructure Partners to release that money, and they will be reviewing those business cases. Then probably just finally, before we're happy to take any questions, is if you look at the timeline of land categorisation decisions, you can see, I think, the immense amount of work and decisions that were being made with and for communities, and I think it just reflects the huge effort by quite a large team in moving through this very valuable work that, although difficult, is part of the recovery process for Hawke's Bay. So I think I'll leave it there, and the team is happy to answer any questions, queries or comments.
Yeah, thank you for that, Chris. I'd also like to acknowledge the relationships that we've had across the region with our TLAs in this process. The Regional Recovery Agency for their role, particularly in the negotiations with Crown to get us to a stage of the 2Cs, the 2As and the 3s. Also, I'd like to acknowledge Bill Bayfield for his role at the start of this process with the Crown and across the region. So we'll just take questions, but really this is a time for acknowledgements around the work that's been done to date. Councillor Rodley.
First down the rank. Very nice. Thank you. Thank you to the whole team, and to acknowledge what a difficult task was put before you with such vague but precise parameters to butt up against, and what a challenging time it has been. So thank you for that work, and to the legal team for ensuring that it has been robust. I think Chair, you probably were going to address in your closing, but just acknowledging those whānau who are out of their homes for Christmas that we would have really liked to move. It's been a really tough year for lots and lots of our whānau, and I think this process has been really thorough, and I endorse decisions that have been made, and for those families who don't have that certainty, we acknowledge you.
Sure.
You, Councillor?
Councillor Rothey, I don't even know where it came from.
2023,
From the
it was
heart.
called. February.
So thank you. Apologies. Apologise. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, look, building on all of that, I know we've tested you guys in this process in terms of the interactions you've had with those communities, but it's only for the very reasons that we've just heard expressed from Councillor Rhodey. We know you've had that dear to your heart as well. One good piece of news, we were advised yesterday that the Pahutakawa Drive North Shore residents are, thrilled with where they've got to. And in addition to acknowledging all the hard work the team have done here, I'd just actually like to shout out to PAMPAC. Tony Clifford, they got slammed. They got absolutely slammed. It's one of Hawke's Bay's biggest employers, and their plant, they cannot produce pulp, and haven't been able to for the whole year. They carried all of their employees the whole way through. They kept them paid. And they didn't just say, well, what about me? They actually partnered with us to produce a solution that we were able to work with to shift that community from 2A to 2C. So along with the team at Mitchell Dace, I'd just like to have a little shout out to them too, because they've been part of this process. But yeah, that's all I really want to say. Thank you.
Councillor McIntosh.
I completely endorse the comments of everyone today, especially as far as the volume and complexity of the work that Chris and the team have been involved in. But actually, I want to especially acknowledge you, Chair, and also you. I suspect a lot of our constituents don't know the extent to which you've had to put up with stuff in addition to your own personal circumstances with your houses and that sort of thing.
Thank you, Councillor McIntosh. And on that note, I would like to publicly say here that I really thank you, staff and councillors, for picking up the baton, so to speak. I've been vacant. Some might even think he's always vacant, but never mind. I've been vacant, and I've only chosen those, and I could only come to important council meetings. Hopefully in the new year I'll be able to pick up the baton again and try to do my best for the council as well as for the community as well. Chris, thank you as well for the work you've done where I've been absent as a chair for the coastal hazards. So once again, I thank everyone, staff included. And if I've been a bit testy and a bit harsh, I do apologise, and I also apologise to CEO and Chris that I've been a bit vocal in places, but I think kites can't fly without headwind. If there was no wind, they won't fly. So it is a testing, and the sharpening of iron happens because of the testing that we do. So thank you very much once again.
Councillor Sees.
Well, I won't do any crying. I'll let everyone else do that. What I wanted to say is, this happened in quite a lot of regions around New Zealand. We know that. And I don't think our community understand how much work was done in this organisation at such vast speed compared to what's happening around the country. Actually getting to the end of land categorisation, I think we're the first in New Zealand, we're the first to do that. And also I went to Michael Fowler's speech around the floods over the history of Hawke's Bay, right back into the, I think he started about 1870 with his first slides. This has happened over and over again, and every time it's happened, 3 times in the 1890s, I think, government and what was then local government, I don't think it was catchment, that hadn't been established yet, but local government said, we won't let this happen again, we won't let our people be in this situation again. And they actually did nothing. And this recategorisation and the voluntary buyout and the moving of people is actually a very significant step towards doing something about creating safer environments. And I know that the two legal team are sitting here because there will be legal challenge about this, and that's quite right. We should always be able to challenge the decisions that are made. And they also needed to be made that we could step forward and say, actually, we're going to draw a line here in what we think's right. So I think it's something to be really proud of and not to be frightened of either. So, Chris, you started with the stock bank repair. We know you did however many years' work in 6 months or something, which was extraordinary. And then following this up with what Bill started and what you came in and finished, Nick, I just think is something really extraordinary. So amidst all the pain that we know people have been through and are still in, actually there's really something extraordinary has happened that we can build on next year. So I feel really proud of whatever small part I've played in that. So thank you to everyone.
Councillor Curtin.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and I won't tread over ground that's already been traversed today, but I think there are two groups that, in addition to the frontline troops, that have done things that can only be described as extraordinary. There are two, I think, significant steps that stick out for me. One is the decision by us councillors and led by the chair to bring Bill Bayfield on board at a critical time and make that important link to central government. And the other important milestone and treasure still with us is Susie and her team. And you can go to chapter 11 or paragraph 11 of the paper and read that table, and it's got a number on it. $247,650,000, and that's $250 million. And in my estimate, that money wouldn't have been received. We wouldn't have been as, if you like, fortunate to have tapped into that resource if Susie and her team hadn't done their job as well and diligently as they did. Extraordinary effort. I don't think there's a council around the country that has been as successful as bringing that sort of a result in for this region than this council and our group of staff here today. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Speakers, Councillor Harding.
Sure, Chair. Look, I don't think words can adequately do justice to the efforts that so many people have put into making the best of the system and the situation that we found ourselves in. There's one group that might have slipped through the cracks that I don't want to let be lost in that acknowledgement, and it is the community groups that stood up and the people who run the hubs. You know, one of the success stories of our response and into recovery, and the highlights has been the way that communities have come together around the leadership provided from within those communities and the resources that those communities brought to help themselves. That is fast becoming the bedrock of our community resilience for the future, and that's a really powerful model. So I'm just extraordinarily grateful to those individuals and those communities who stepped up to help us make this all work. Thank you.
Well done. Any other speakers? Mike.
Well, I'd just like to echo the words of everyone else, but I am mindful of our mana whenua and those that have the multiple ownership to their whenua, and that journey for them is still continuing, unfortunately. So I look forward to the day when that is resolved as well and they're able to move forward. So kia ora. But other than that, absolutely support the work that has been done by this council and of course our local territorial authorities as part of that. Kia ora tātou.
Councillor Foley.
Thanks, Chair. Look, most of it's been said, but I think what we do know is that, Gabrielle wasn't our first flood. We've had many floods before, but the difference, I think, and it's been said, is our response and our support that we've received. And so this is probably the first time, certainly at this level, that we've had the support put in front of us from central government in terms of the dollars. And so I know the team's working very hard behind the scenes to come up with new schemes and flood mitigation, and so we need to work really hard, sort of our communities, to come up and support those solutions and not waste that opportunity, and in our future will just be so much better for it. So thanks to the team.
Thank you, and just supporting everyone's comments really, and yes, our impacted communities is what we do this for, so thank you for acknowledging that. So in terms of our challenges forward, because the mahi's not done, it's really just begun before we start building. This is a clear signal really to say that our priorities as a regional council is around completing this process. So when we go out to LTP, when we go out to the public next year, we have that at our forefront.
And just building on that through you, Chair, I think, as someone correctly observed, we've now got $250 million worth of infrastructure construction in front of us, and that comes with a lot of opportunity and a lot of challenge. And in talking with the likes of Crown Infrastructure Partners, and talking with the likes of some of our big infrastructure consultancies, they've given us some really good advice in the last 6 to 8 weeks about how this organisation gears up to go from a $5 to $10 million a year business in terms of capital to a $50 million a year business for an intensive period of time. And they've been very clear with us that the only way we are likely to be successful in doing that is to put a program management office in place, which we are just in the process of doing. We have a job as a collective executive leadership team to ensure that group of people remains connected to the wider organisation, but also has a singular focus on getting these things built for those communities as efficiently and effectively as we possibly can. So it's a great challenge to have, and in some ways an exciting challenge to have, but one which comes with quite a responsibility on the organisation to deliver in a really tight time frame. So I know there is a lot of ministerial interest and almost weekly phone calls from chief executives in Wellington to just to keep an eye on progress. So we look forward to that in the coming year, and we're in the process of gearing up to do that delivery.
Thank you, Nick. Well, we have a recommendation to receive and note the land categorisation update. Can I have a mover? Councillor Sears and Councillor McIntosh. All those who agree, say aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Can I just make
one? Thank you.
Madam Chair, Hiniwai, I also want to really acknowledge you and thank you for the year. It's, as a new chair, stepping into a cyclone, and your willingness to keep learning and growing to lead this council, I really want to acknowledge you and wish you a break over Christmas, and looking forward to seeing you refreshed next year. So thank you for everything you've done.
Thank you. All those who agree, say aye.
Aye.
Those against.
What she said.
It's no more.
Yourself.
Yeah. Thanks, team. Thanks for coming up.
We've all been moved.
Yeah. Okay, our last item is minor items. So we've got Councillor Harding around green hydrogen for Hawke's Bay.
All right, Chair. Look, it was just suggested that it might be beneficial and interesting for some people if I mentioned a recent initiative which is taking place, and hopefully will gather some steam somewhat under the auspices of regional transport and the Joint Climate Action Committee, and it is looking at the potential for green hydrogen to address some of our regional climate footprint. So just for the benefit of those who are uncertain, green hydrogen is hydrogen gas for fuel made from renewable resources. And we are fortunate that a country's blessed by large, an abundance of potential and actual renewable resources. You'll all be familiar with our place in the Ring of Fire and the geothermal activity and the geothermal energy in Taupo and similar places. What you may not know is that New Zealand is actively involved in looking to exploit that geothermal energy throughout the Ring of Fire in the Pacific, and we are lucky that we have some local people through Stephen Daish and Mitchell Daish involved in looking at that work. So with the idea of generating or electrolysing, so splitting hydrogen from water using geothermal energy. So we have some of that expertise to bring to bear on projects within Hawke's Bay. That particular project that's being scoped at the moment is a joint venture between Pacific Hydrogen, Obayashi Corporation from Japan, and Mitchell Daish. That has presented an opportunity to bring similar expertise to the transport carbon footprint of Hawke's Bay, and we know from our modelling that transport is our single biggest source of carbon emissions in Hawke's Bay, and approximately half of that comes from heavy transport, and hydrogen shows particular potential as an alternative fuel or a dual fuel for heavy industry because of the advantages in fuel density, and also it's relatively straightforward to convert existing equipment to put in a dual fuel engine to replace or augment your diesel. So it's a great potential opportunity. We also have an abundance of sun here and some large organisations looking at industrial scale solar generation. So we have a great opportunity to look at bringing that expertise together with our natural resources here and the skills and knowledge that we have within Hawke's Bay to have a crack at making a difference in our regional carbon footprint around heavy transport. So I just wanted to table that and acknowledge in particular Stephen Daish from Mitchell Daish, Aya Inagaki from Halcyon Power, and Halcyon Power is happens to be based in Taupo, and it's a joint venture between Turo Paki Trust and Obayashi Corporation, generating. It's the first commercial green hydrogen generation plant operating in New Zealand, just up the road, using Mokai energy. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harden. Councillor Williams, the PM visit.
Yeah, thank you. And this is in the acknowledgements, I think, great way to end the year category. I don't know if anyone saw the footage of Chris Luxon, Prime Minister Luxon, speaking after that session, which I had the great privilege to attend on behalf of this council. But it was quite clear that he was really struck by how coherent and clear and community-based our message was of the vision we have and our priorities for rebuilding Hawke's Bay post-Cyclone Gabriel. He referred to it as an exemplar, a leading light, a model of collaboration in local government. So I think that's something to be really proud of, and I've been reflecting on why that happened, and I suggest that it's no accident. And I think there's a big backstory here in the forging of the Matariki structure as a partnership between Mana Whenua and the chair of the regional council and the CEOs. The fact that our regional leaders have spent so much time together, and its CEOs and the mayors and the chair of this organisation, including right through this year, the standing up of the Regional Recovery Agency, the work that Louise and her team and the staff of this organisation have done to bring together all of those threads, and the commitment, and I think I just cannot overstate this, the commitment of Mana Whenua and by Mana Whenua to partner with the councils in this region to share the challenges and the burdens we face. And may I just say, long may that endure, and damn the torpedoes around us. So to come back to the script, so with all of that backstory, we were able to present 6 bullet points. Mayor Walker led off as MC saying, we speak with one voice. And we did, and the 6 bullet points were around housing, orchard recovery and silt removal, rural roads, and the funding required to get product from farm gate to market. For our perspective, flood protection, which I spoke to, the regulatory settings, so that we can get from the 2 Cs to the 1s, and in particular, ensure that we have the business case approved because there is no consenting risk, and that we have a land interest so that we can have a fast and effective acquisition process there, around water security, and around really, again, Hawke's Bay piloting the way through the new Hawke's Bay model for 3 waters delivery that we already had ready to go through that very type of collaboration. So it was a proud day, I think, for Hawke's Bay, and credit to all of those involved in that backstory that revealed so compellingly last Friday. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, Councillor Williams, a lovely way to end. Thank you all today. It has been another long, Wednesday's always a long day, so the end of the month. But very grateful for everyone being here, sharing in the decision making, and also bringing to light the concerns of our community. So to close, Charlie, can you lead us? You opened us. Could you close us with a karakia for the day?
Kia ora, Madam Chair, thank you very much. Kia tātou katoa. Kia te whae o tō tātou ariki a i karaiti, me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga teitanga ki te wairua tapu, ake, Amen.
Kia ora tātou. Thank you.